So, welcome to tonight's Tanya class. Tonight we are learning Tanya, chapter 22. In Hebrew it's called Perek Beis. And tonight's chapter in Tanya is a very, very important chapter. And that is, as we know, every chapter is unique in Tanya because it's the basis of mysticism. Tonight we're going to learn about the source that, I'll say it in Hebrew and I'll translate, that Klipa, Sitra Achra, and Tuma get its energy and its life force. So in short, referring to anything which is counter to God and godliness in an apparent way. So Klipa actually comes from the word of a shell. As you have a fruit, so you have the inside that you eat, and then you have the shell that protects it. So the part that you eat, that's the part that you consume. The shell it's not edible, you don't eat it. I mean, you can process it, etc. But the point is, the shell is a shell. In terms of you don't see the edible part. Sitra Achra, as the name is, the other side, means it's not the side of holiness, and the side of impurity. If you just put the on vibrate, if you don't mind. Anyway, so. Where that gets its energy and its life force from. So we've been discussing the last few weeks the idea of Achdus Hashem. What does Achdus Hashem mean? Achdus Hashem means that the oneness of God. In other words, what does the oneness of God mean? We know that the simple translation is there's one God, means there's no other gods. The Baal Shem Tov explained and taught us, what does Achdus Hashem mean? That the only true existence that exists anywhere in the world is what? Just God. So God is all over. So if God is all over, and God is everything, how could impurity and klipot and sichra achra, all these negative forces, have vitality? Where do they get vitality from if everything is God and godliness? So here we're going to learn today a beautiful painting, a beautiful illustration of the way God gives energy into this world, and where you can have energy even in things which are counter to God and godliness. By introduction. So there's something which is called in Kabbalah and in mysticism, there's something which is called, in Hebrew, it's called a tzimtzum. Now what is a tzimtzum? A tzimtzum is a concealment. Now, obviously, the term concealment means concealment, but there's many levels to concealment. Meaning to say like this: God, we know, is infinite. So His power is infinite. In order to create this physical materialistic world, He had to create a tzimtzum, a concealment, so that His infinite power does not radiate in this world in its fullest, because if it did, guess what? We wouldn't be. So God went ahead and created something which is called a tzimtzum, where He concealed His infinite power. Now, in the concealment process, there's many and multiple levels of the concealment process.
Tzimtzum is reducing down, watering down.
Okay.
Tzimtzum.
Okay. What does that mean? That means like this.
It's okay, because it's a very
What?
definition of Gnosticism. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. What do we mean is like this. There's something which is called, in the chart of the Kabbalistic chart, we know there's 10 sfirot. Now the highest of the 10 sfirot is called Keser. In Keser there's two parts, there's Tainug, there's pleasure, and there's Ratzon and will. Now, so since what is the highest part in the 10 sfirot is Keser, in the Keser there's Tainug, the intense, deep pleasure, but it's also the will of God. So the deepest part, the highest part of Keser would be, the way it relates to the world, is the power of Ratzon, of will. Now, what does that mean practically? That means the question is, what is Ratzon Hashem? What is the will of Hashem? Now, the reality is, everything and anything that exists in this world is what? Is Ratzon Hashem. Because if it wasn't the will of Hashem, would it be? It wouldn't be. So the fact is that everything that God created in this world is 100% Ratzon Hashem, the will of Hashem. Because otherwise it wouldn't be. Now, but could you say that in the will of Hashem there's different levels? Absolutely. And we're going to learn now, we're going to explore 3 different levels of ratzon, of will. So, let's say for example, you have a job, right? You have a business. You're trying to earn a living. Now, so you have a business, you buy merchandise, you sell merchandise. So, what is your will? Your will is to make a profit, to make a living, to make a profit, so that you can live a proper, kosher Jewish life, live a divine life, and be a productive person in this world. That is your will. Is that your external will, or is that your internal will? What's the whole purpose of business?
External.
The whole purpose of business is to earn a living so you can live a kosher, beautiful life. That is your will. Now, how about the work? So the goal of the work is to earn a living. But the actual work that you're doing, is that your goal in life, to be a worker? No, you need it to earn the living. So earning a living is the goal. You have to survive, so therefore you have to work. In other words, if someone was able to provide you a check and you didn't have to work, would you go work? You would sit and learn Torah a whole day, right?
You can get political.
You do mitzvot, you'd pray, right? So you're working because you want to earn a living. Now, so you see already 2 levels here. One is in Hebrew it's called your pnimiyat haratzon, your internal will, which is to earn a livelihood so you can live and serve God. And then there's the external will that you have to work. It's not bad. I mean, you do want to work, because if you don't work, you're not going to earn a living. So you do want to work, but it's not really your pnimiyat haratzon, it's your chitzonit haratzon, it's an external will that you have. Now, what happens, you're standing in your store, and again, your pnimiyat haratzon is to earn a living. Chitzonit haratzon is, you got to work. And your enemy walks in. And when you see him, the blood starts boiling and your hair starts standing up on your hand, and you see your enemy walking in, and he's in the mood of buying. Now, the reality is, are you interested in meeting your enemy, right? Not that anyone has enemies. You have to really make this up, because we all love everybody, right? But let's say you had an enemy, or in theory, right? And an enemy of yours walks in, and he's ready to buy a nice purchase. Do you really want to do business with him?
No.
No, you don't want to do it. He's your enemy. You would rather he didn't walk into the store, or you'd rather he walked into the store, someone else deal with him. But on the other hand, no one else is here. You do want to make the sale, because you need to make a living so you can live your life that you want to live. So how do you deal with your enemy that walks in? With a real natural smile. Hey, I'm so happy you came today. No, you're standing there, deep breath. Yes, what do you want? And to yourself you're saying, I can't wait for this thing to be over. I'm going to do the business transaction because I need to. He's a customer, I need to move the merchandise, I need to make the money so I can earn my living. You see the way it changes? So in the same business transaction, you have all 3 things taking place here. In this one transaction with your enemy. One hand, your pnimiyat haratzon, your really internal will is being fulfilled. Why? Because you're earning a living. So you can live a good, beautiful, kosher Jewish life, if that's your dream. Your external will is you're working. But now there's a 3rd thing came into place. It's not your internal will, it's your external will of your external will. That means, I don't want to deal with this guy. I have no choice. So I'm not there with my real face, I'm there with my mask on, big time. And you bite your lip, when he leaves you probably have some bleed gushing right from some of your lips that you bit, but you did the business deal. You did the business deal. You weren't happy about doing it, but you did it. Why'd you do it? Because you have to earn a living. Okay. You got the. In the Hebrew, this is called a mashal. This is called an analogy. What a parable? What is this? What is this for? What does it relate to? Very simple. God has also, as we said before, ratzon, a will. What is God's pnimius haratzon? What is His real will? Why He went ahead and created this physical world with all the people in there and gave us a Torah and mitzvot? What was God's real perfect picture was? What was His pnimius haratzon? The perfect picture?
That we should love each other the way He loves us.
Exactly. That we should love each other, which is not easy, but when we love each other, He loves it. We should study Torah. We should do mitzvot, and loving is one of the 613. There's many other ones. To be happy, for example. Every one of the 613 commandments, the positive and the negative. We should pray. We should act as a godly human being. So when a Jew, or for that matter, any person lives the life that God has intended for that person, what's happening right now is the pnimius haratzon, the internal will of God, is taking place. So when you study Torah, and you do a mitzvah, and you pray, and you're acting loving to your fellow and to your neighbor, etc., and you're really, really happy, what energy is flowing through that transaction and that moment?
God's will.
God's will, but which will?
Internal.
Internal, face-to-face, non-stop, non-diluted, beautiful energy is fueling that moment. So, and to think about it, when you study Torah, and when you do a mitzvah, when you pray, how do you feel? You feel great. Why do you feel great? Here's the answer. Because guess what you're plugging into? You're connecting to God's will, the pnimius haratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when you're plugged in, it feels great. It's like, for example, let's say you have a computer, and you have, let's say, 3 connections on the computer. You have dial-up, and that is very, very slow. Then you have, let's say, DSL, which is flying pretty okay. And then you have, let's say, fiber. That's like, wow, right? Super highway. Now, if you have a computer and you're trying to get on the internet and upload files, download files, whatever you're trying to do, obviously all kosher stuff, and you're on fiber, you're doing 100 up, 100 down. I mean, you're flying. How does it feel? You feel like you're sitting at a computer, when is this next screen going to open up? No, before you push the button, the screen is open, it's downloaded, uploaded, it's beautiful. That's what happens when a person prays, does mitzvot, and studies Torah. You're flying because you're connecting to God's what? God's ratzon, God's will. Which part of God's will? Pnimius haratzon. And that's an amazing connection. So if you ever want to plug in to God's will, the pnimius haratzon, very simple. You don't have to pay for the internet connection. All you need to do is pull out a prayer book, pray, take a chumash, a mishnah, a talmud, some mysticism study, or do any mitzvah, you'll be plugged into God. How are you going to feel? How are you going to feel when you plugged into God? High speed.
Marvelous.
You're going to feel marvelous. You're going to feel great because you're plugged in high speed. That is what's called pnimius haratzon of God. And that's like the highest connection possible. Now, why is it the highest connection? Because that's what God really wanted. That's God's will. That we should have a relationship with Him through the mediums that He created, set up, which is Torah study, mitzvot, and prayer. You want to do anything else, guess what? That's your connection. It wasn't God's, and it's not going to work. Then there's something which is called chitzoni haratzon. The fact is, in order for God to create us here in this world, so that we can fulfill the ultimate, which is to pray, study new mitzvot, did He have to create a physical world? Did He have to create houses, cars, food, a drink, AC, heat, whatever it may be? All the material, did He have to create that? Sure. Otherwise we wouldn't have this physical world. Now, was that His goal? It wasn't His goal. It was not His goal. But it's needed. It's something which is a medium. So is God happy to create this physical world? Absolutely. Was it his will? Absolutely. Was it his vision? That's his goal? No. But that's part of the plan in order to get to his goal. So therefore, it's God's will, this physical world. But it's not his previous haratzon. It's not his internal will. It's its external will. It's leading up, it's a means to an end. It's leading up to the ultimate goal. So therefore, when you look at this physical world, and this materialistic world, and you connect to it, what are you connecting to? You're connecting to God's will. Which will? His chitzoni taratzon. Not his internal will, his external will. Why? Because God didn't give it that much energy. He put his energy where? Into the Torah, into the Mitzvot and prayer. As God says, I myself, I gave myself into the Torah. So in the Torah you can get God himself. That's the second level. What's the third level? When the enemy walks into the store? That is, God wanted to create a world where we could score big points. Now, in order to score big points, if you go on like this your whole life, can you score big? No, that's called flat. Flat. Right? You're not going anywhere. You can go sideways. Right? So God had to create bumps in the road, because with a bump in the road, after the bump, not only do you go back here, you actually go higher. So God had to create something which is called test. What's a test? A test is a bump. Why is it a test? Because when you fall down a cliff, you have two choices. You can say, I'm a loser, and you stay there, and the game is over. Or you can say, what? I don't belong down here, and you jump up, and then you realize you can jump, you jump even higher. You learned how to jump all of a sudden. But had you not fallen, you wouldn't have known how to jump. Had you not fallen, you wouldn't have known how to jump. Like Rabbi always quotes, and he says, it says in the Psalms, Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. A tzaddik, a righteous man, falls 7 times before he stands up. Stands up really. In other words, we fall, literally, in order to really start moving, you have to fall 7 times. So if you haven't fallen 7 times, you're not going to be able to move yet. You want to move, you got to fall 7 times. And if you fell twice, guess what? Not enough. 7 times you got to fall. And for every 7 times, you got a major bump up if you're willing to use that energy and bump back up. So God had to make a test. How do you make a dip in the road? You got to take a beautiful road that's beautiful, that you can drive peacefully, and you got to dig a pit. Now the pit is really not nice because someone's going to fall into the pit. But guess what? When you fall into the pit, you can get out and you go up even higher. So God created something in this world which is called klipot, sitra achra, tuma, impurity, anything which is counter to holiness, negativity. God created all that. Now, was that God's vision? That we should fall into impurity and negativity and stay there? No. His vision was Torah, Mitzvot, and prayer. Did God want us to just live in a materialistic life? No, that's a means to an end. But why did God create the klipot sitra achra? It's not something even God wanted. It's like he did it because he wants to give us an opportunity to grow. But not only is it not his internal will, for sure not. It not only is not his external will, in Hebrew it's coming from achirayim, from the hind part of God. It's not a happy thing he's creating. He's not creating the test because he really wants you to fall. He's creating it, he has no choice because he wants to give you an opportunity to jump. So he creates something which is called achirayim. Now, back to the point. So in other words, when God created the world, everything in this world comes from who? From God. Certain things have the pnimiyat haratzon, have the essence of God's will, and as we said, that's Torah, Mitzvot, and prayer. The regular world, the materialistic world, the world that we have to live in, that we have to eat, and we have to drink, and we need a home, and we need a car, and we need all our materialistic things that we need, that is, God wanted us to have that, so we should be able to live in this materialistic world. Otherwise, why would he put us here without the proper supplies? And then there's something which is called what? Klipot, besitra achra, and tuma. The impurities that God created in the world, the negativity and the downfalls, that is not coming from a high level energy of God. That's coming from a very, very low level energy of God. And that is why it's called Elokim Acherim. What does Elokim means God, not referring to God, the strange gods. Acherim coming from behind. It's like very, very, very low, very, very low energy. All comes from God, otherwise it wouldn't exist. But it's a low-level energy that God used to create these type of impure and these type of negative forces so that there can be tests. So unfortunately a wicked person will fall and will stay there, and a righteous person will use it as a springboard to jump up. Okay. That is one definition of why it's called Elokim Acherim. There's another reason why it is called Elokim Acherim. In other words, this low level negative energy is because Acherim comes from strange and estranged from God. What does that mean? That means like this. As we said before, there's something which is called Achdus Hashem. What does Achdus Hashem mean? That everything is what? Everything is God. There's not one thing in this world that's not God. Right. Now, so since everything is God, certain things you feel God greater presence, and certain things you don't feel so strong presence, but you still feel God in everything. Elokim Acherim, Klipot and Sitra Achara and Tuma is coming from a place which is called Elokim Acherim, means that they establish a statement that says we are not connected to God. We have our own independent power and energy. That is called what in English? Idolatry. You call it Avodah Zarah. It's called Avodah Zarah, idolatry. So idolatry is what? Really being dishonest. Because the fact is, if God stopped giving you your existence, where would you be? What would you be? Nothing. So it's false. But that is what idolatry does. It stands up, makes a false statement that what? I have my own existence. Now that is why the Alter Rebbe explains over here, when someone, God forbid, is arrogant, someone's arrogant. Think about this, as you call it ego. When someone is arrogant, it is just like you are worshiping idols. Why? Think about it. What does idolatry mean? Idolatry, on a simple level, saying one thing. I have an independent existence of God. Now, if someone gets up and says, hey, I'm an idol worshiper, I'm the boss. Okay, fine. The person's an idol worshiper. But here's the tricky thing. You can have someone that says, I believe in God. I have faith in God. And prays and studies and does mitzvot. And all for the right reasons, 100%. But guess what? They're arrogant. By being arrogant, what you're really saying is, I, capital I, the capital I, what's that mean? You have an independent existence of the oneness of God? That is pure idolatry. And look how simple it is. You can disconnect yourself from God. By the mere fact that you say I, and that one letter, you've created an independent existence from God, you've disconnected yourself from God, and that is 100% pure idolatry. How can a person say I, when the only reason why you exist because God exists and you're part of God?
Crazy.
It's crazy.
It's called insanity.
Not only that, it says in the Talmud, and the Alter Rebbe brings it down here, that if you want to have a relationship with God, what does it mean you want a relationship with God? You want God to dwell in you and amongst you, whatever you're doing, you have to be humble. So there's two parts. Arrogance is obviously idolatry, which is disconnecting you from God. But more importantly, when a person lacks you knows arrogant is in the negative. But if you're not humble, guess what? How's God going to reside within you? So not only can't you not be arrogant, but you also have to be humble. So it's like the positive mitzvah and the negative mitzvah. In other words, you want to not be arrogant, but you're also in a positive state, you want to be humble. So if a person, according to Torah, takes on a major revolution in this chapter of Tanya. He says, a person does not practice humility, guess what? God is not going to be sitting on your lap, or you sitting on God's lap.
Not going to manifest in you.
Exactly. If you want to have a real relationship with God, you want God to be felt in your life, guess what? Humble. If you're not going to practice humility, you know who's not hanging out with you?
God.
God. And if God's not hanging out with you, guess what happens now? You're hanging out with yourself. And guess how much power you have? Nothing. God pulls the plug. What are you? Nothing. And here it's interesting. If you give a look at the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments, the ones that God said himself, at Mount Sinai, when God came down, he uttered the first 2 commandments and the people fainted. They couldn't handle it. But the first 2 commandments that we all heard, because everybody was there, from God, is 2 commandments. What are 2 commandments? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your God. And Lo Yelecha Elokim Achem, you shouldn't have any other gods. No other gods. 2 commandments. So the positive commandments, I am God your God. And the negative commandments is, do not make any other gods. So the Alter says, what are those 2 commandments? The Alter says, very, very simple. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God your God, is saying what? Everything in this world is God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Everything that exists in this world, from yourself, from the people, to the places, to the things, to the tables and the chairs and the streets and the air and the water, everything is God. So if you want to connect to the first commandment, which God gave each and every one of us, what does your vision have to be? The only thing that exists is God. The only thing that exists is God. What does that resemble?
Love.
No, everything exists is God, and therefore, that's true humility. That is true humility. The only thing that exists is God. That's why, when someone asks you, how are you doing? What's your answer? Baruch Hashem. Thank God. How am I doing? I'm not doing anything. Thank God. I'm alive and I can maybe, be part of God. What's the second commandment? Lo yi alecha elokim acherim. You shouldn't make any other gods. How are you making any other gods?
Is it make any other gods or have any?
Have a play on words.
Connotations.
Correct, but you shouldn't have any other gods, right? Lo yi alecha. You create it. You technically create it in your mind.
Have it, you created it.
You create it in your mind.
You're thinking.
Well, the word is
You're correct. So what is it? Lo yiyah, you shouldn't have, right? Very simple. Who's the other God? Your ego.
Yes.
Your ego. So the negative commandment is kill that ego, or don't let it arise.
Don't give it any power.
Don't give it any power.
I'm God, you shut up.
I don't think God.
If I was writing it, it'd be different. If I was
I hear you.
If you were God,
I'm not. I mean, if I was
a speechwriter.
If God was saying one, what do you think of this?
Politically
Any
speaking.
editing?
Anyway, so the point is like this. Here you see how important this chapter of Tanya is. Because to recap, this chapter of Tanya is establishing 2 major points. Number 1 is that everything in this world, as we discussed the last 2 weeks, comes from God. Everything is God. Now, what he really clarifies in a beautiful way in this chapter is, where's all the stuff coming from that looks like not God? And he explains very, very simple, that ultimately everything is the will of Hashem. In the will of Hashem, there's the internal will of Hashem, the external will of Hashem, and coming from, so to speak, from the behind with will of Hashem, which is totally like giving your enemy some kind of gift. And then he goes into the most powerful part of the chapter. I mean, it's all powerful, is that when a person is arrogant, that is like idolatry. And it's possible that when a person is arrogant, you are transgressing The commandment of making another God.
That's right.
Exactly, and you agree, and that's right. So in other words, there's two lessons that come out of the two commandments. One is to have true humility, and obviously we can have a class for hours what humility means. One is to be truly humble, and not truly humble, and B, to be careful not to be arrogant. Because not being humble and or being arrogant will totally not allow you to be a vessel to have a true and deep and meaningful relationship with God.